The galaxy's greatest warrior mocked the dead. A human made him pay. The moment the giant warrior spat on the memorial stone, my blood turned cold. I was sitting in the third row of the grand arena on the planet Vex Halas Prime, surrounded by aliens 10 times my size, and I had just watched the most famous warrior in the galaxy disrespect the dead of 100 different species. My hands started shaking, not from fear, from something else. My name is Oliver Grant. I'm a commander in the Earth Defense Fleet, and I was sent to this tournament as a simple observer. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 40 years ago. We were still new, we were still small. Most aliens thought of us as children playing in a grown-up world. I was told before I left Earth that my job was to watch, to learn, and to say nothing, no matter what happened. I was to keep my mouth shut and my face calm. That plan ended the second Kragoff, the undefeated, opened his mouth. Kragoff was the champion of the Vornikai warrior race. He stood almost 7 ft tall. His skin was the color of dark iron, and his arms were thick as tree trunks. He had won 311 matches in a row. For 200 years, no one in the galaxy had beaten him. He was a legend. Children on 1,000 worlds drew pictures of him. Songs were sung about his victories. But today, Kragoff was doing something no warrior was supposed to do. The tournament of 10,000 suns was held once every 100 years. Before the fighting started, there was a sacred ceremony called the reading of the honored dead. An old priest stood in the center of the arena and read out the names of warriors who had died in battle. Over the last 100 years, every species sent a list. The Tellurians sent their names, the Jaxi sent theirs. Even Earth had sent a small list, mostly from the Mars colony tragedy and the Battle of Ceres. The names were supposed to be read in silence. That was the rule. That was the custom. Kragoff broke it. When the priest read the name of a fallen Jaxi warrior, Kragoff laughed. When the priest read the names of the children lost at Mars Dome 4, Kragoff turned to the crowd and made a joke about humans dying like small farm animals. When the priest read the name of a Tellurian mother who had died protecting her young, Kragoff said she must have been slow and stupid. The crowd did not know what to do. Some laughed nervously, some looked away. Other warriors waiting to fight looked down at their feet. No one said anything. No one stopped him. I sat there and I thought of my sister. Her name was Hannah Grant. She was 23 years old when she died. She was on a colony ship heading toward a new Earth settlement when pirates attacked. Pirates had been given the ship's travel path by a Vornikai trading clan. The Vornikai had sold our route for a tiny profit. My sister and 300 other people never made it home. Her name had just been read. Kragoff had just laughed at it. The priest finished the reading. He looked. The ceremony was ruined. The ambassadors from a dozen worlds looked angry, but none of them moved. None of them spoke. They were afraid. Kragoff was too strong. Kragoff was too famous. No one wanted to be the one to challenge him. I stood up. The alien next to me, a tall, thin creature with blue skin, reached out to stop me. He whispered that I should sit down. He said I would bring shame on my whole planet. He said Kragoff would end me in seconds. I gently moved his hand away. I walked down the long steps toward the arena floor. Every step felt like a Mile, I could hear the crowd going quiet. As they noticed me, a small human, walking alone toward the most dangerous warrior in the galaxy. My uniform was plain gray. I carried no weapon. I was not even wearing armor. The cameras turned toward me. The broadcast system which sent this tournament to 200 star systems locked onto my face. Somewhere on Earth, my mother was probably watching. My commanding officer was probably watching. Every human in the galaxy was probably watching. I reached the arena floor. The sand was warm under my boots. The ancient challenge stone stood in the center. Black rock older than my whole civilization. To touch it was to call for a blood right duel. To call for a blood right was to say that honor had been broken and only combat could fix it. I placed my hand on the stone. The whole arena gasped. 10 million beings across 200 worlds gasped with them. Kragoff turned to look at me. At first, he did not even see me. His eyes swept past where a normal-sized warrior would be standing. Then he looked down and he saw me, a small human hand on the challenge stone staring up at him with steady eyes. He started to laugh. His laugh was deep and slow. It rolled through the arena like thunder. Other Vornakai warriors began to laugh with him. Soon most of the crowd was laughing too. A human, a tiny, soft human challenging the greatest warrior of the age. It was a joke. It was the funniest thing they had ever seen. I waited for the laughing to stop. It took a long time. When the arena was finally quiet again, I spoke. My voice was not loud, but the sound system carried it to every corner. I said the words clearly. I said them slowly. I invoke blood right for the dead he has dishonored. The laughing started again, but this time it was different. Some in the crowd were still amused, but others, the older ones, the wiser ones, they had stopped smiling. They knew the law. A blood right once called could not be refused. Not even by a champion, not even by Kragoff. The head judge, an ancient being with 6 arms in a golden robe, stood up from his high seat. He raised one of his hands for silence. The arena obeyed. He asked me if I understood what I had done. He asked me if I understood that Kragoff had ended more warriors than there were stars in the sky above us. He asked me if I wanted to take back my challenge. There would be no shame. He said my people were new to the galaxy and mistakes were allowed. I said no. I said I understood perfectly. I said the challenge stood. The judge looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at Kragoff, who was still chuckling to himself, shaking his massive head in disbelief. The judge spoke the formal words. Blood right was accepted. The duel would happen at dawn on the main arena floor. In front of the whole galaxy. No energy weapons, no shields, no outside help. One challenger, one champion, one fight. I walked off the arena floor. My legs were steady, but my heart was pounding. The blue-skinned alien I had been sitting next to was gone. His seat was empty. I think he did not want to be seen next to a dead man walking. As I left the arena, a Vornakai guard stopped me. He did not look cruel. He looked tired and a little sad. He told me that if I wanted to leave the planet before dawn, no one would stop me. He told me that running would bring shame, but at least I would live. He told me that Kragoff had killed stronger warriors than me before breakfast. I thanked him for his kindness. I told him I would not be running. I walked back to the small guest room. that had been given to me by the Earth Embassy. My hands were shaking again. But this time I let them shake. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, just breathing. Then I did three things. I pulled out a small paper notebook. Real paper. My grandfather had given it to me when I first joined the fleet. He told me that when things got bad, I should write by hand because it slowed the mind down and let me think clearly. I wrote 3 letters. The first was to my mother, telling her that I loved her and that whatever happened, I was not afraid. The second was to my commanding officer, asking that my death, if it came, not be used as a reason to start a war. The third letter was different. It was meant to be read aloud after the duel. No matter who won, I wrote it slowly, choosing every word. Then I turned on my personal data pad. I began to study. I pulled up every recording I could find of Kragoff in battle, 311 matches. I watched them all, not for his strengths. Everyone knew his strengths. I watched for his weaknesses. Every warrior has them, every single one. The stars outside my window were bright and cold. Somewhere out there, Kragoff was probably sleeping. He was not worried. He was not studying me. Why would he? I was just a human. That was his first mistake. I watched the recordings until the sky began to turn gray with early light. I did not sleep. I did not eat anything heavy. I drank only water. When the dawn horns began to sound across Vex Hollows, Prime calling the people to the tournament, I was ready. I stood up. I put on my plain gray uniform. I picked up my only weapon, a standard combat knife that cost 40 credits at any supply store. I looked at myself in the small mirror, a small, soft human with tired eyes. I smiled. Then I walked out the door, toward the arena, toward Kragoff, toward whatever was waiting for me in the rising sun. The path to the arena was lined with aliens who had come to see me die. That was the truth of it, and I made myself accept it as I walked. Some of them threw small flowers at my feet, which was a Vornikai tradition meant to honor the condemned. Others simply stared. Few, the kindest ones, looked away as if they did not want to remember my face. Once the fight was over, I kept walking. The morning air was cool and smelled of something like cinnamon mixed with metal. 2 moons were still visible in the lightning sky. I counted my steps. I had learned during my time in a prison camp years ago that counting steps was a good way to keep the mind steady when the body wanted to panic. I had been captured during the Krell border war. I spent 18 months in a cage the size of a small closet. I ate whatever insects crawled into the cage. I drank water that dripped from the ceiling pipes. When our fleet finally found us, I was one of only 4 survivors out of 60. I weighed 85 lb. I could barely see, but I had lived, and every day since then had felt like a gift I had earned by refusing to up it. The galaxy did not know this about humans. They did not know our history. They saw our green planet and our blue oceans and our polite diplomats, and they thought we were soft. They did not know that every human alive today came from a long, long line of people who had refused to die. Plagues had tried to end us. Ice ages had tried to end us. Wars and storms and hunger had all tried to end us. And here we were, still walking, still breathing, still standing up when we should have been finished long ago. Kragoff did not know this about us. Kragoff was about to learn. As I neared the arena entrance, a group of reporters rushed forward. They held small floating cameras and shouted questions in a dozen languages. The translation devices in my ear worked overtime to keep up. One reporter, a bright yellow creature with 4 eyes, asked me if I had any final words for my family. I stopped. I looked directly into her cameras. I said, I'm not planning to die today. She blinked all 4 of her eyes at me. She did not know what to say to that. I walked past her and through the arena gates. Inside the Warriors' preparation room, the air was thick and warm. Other competitors were getting ready for their own matches, which would happen later in the day. They wore heavy armor and carried huge weapons. When I walked in, they stopped what they were doing and watched me. One of them, a quiet Tellurian with silver scales, walked over to me. He bowed his head slightly, which was a rare sign of respect among his people. He asked if I needed any equipment, better armor, a larger weapon, anything from the tournament supply room. I thanked him. I told him I had everything I needed. I showed him my small combat knife held in a simple belt sheath. He looked at the knife for a long time. Then he looked at me. He said something I will never forget. He said, "Human, I do not know if you are the bravest person I have ever met or the most foolish, but I will watch your fight with honor, no matter how it ends." I told him that was the kindest thing anyone had said to me on this planet. He bowed his head again and returned to his own preparations. I sat on a simple bench and began the breathing routine I had been taught during my flight training. Slow breath in for 4 count, hold for 4, slow breath out for 4, hold for 4. Again, I let my mind empty. I let my body cool. A fight is won long before the first blow is ever thrown. My old instructor used to say, a fight is won in the quiet moments before the door to the preparation room slid open. Every alien in the room went completely still. Kragoth walked in. He had to duck his head to fit through the doorway. He was dressed in dark battle armor now, heavy plates over his chest and arms. A massive warhammer was strapped across his back. In his armor, he looked even larger than he had in the arena the day before. And GT snorts. And GT, a single one of his arms was thicker than my entire chest. He looked around the room until he found me. The other warriors all stepped aside, clearing a path. Kragoth walked slowly toward me and stopped only when he was standing over me. I did not stand up. I looked up at him calmly. He studied my face. He seemed confused. He seemed almost curious. He said, "You are not afraid." I said, "I'm afraid, but fear does not always make a person run." He tilted his head. This was not an answer he had expected. He sat down on the bench across from me. The bench creaked under his weight. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke in a lower voice, one that the cameras outside would never pick up. He told me he did not want to end me. He told me he respected courage, even foolish courage. He told me there was still time if I walked out of the arena right now and publicly took back my challenge. He would not pursue me. I would lose all honor, but I would live. I could return to Earth. I could grow old. I listened to every word. Then I asked him a question. I asked him if he knew the name Hannah Grant. He frowned. He did not know the name. I told him she was my sister. I told him she had died on a colony ship that was Attacked by pirates, I told him the pirates had received the ship's route from a Vornikai trading clan who had sold it for a small profit. I told him that my sister was 23 years old. She had wanted to be a teacher. She was going to start her first teaching job on the new colony world. I told him her name had been on the roll of the honored dead yesterday. When the priest had read it, Kragoth had laughed. Kragoth went very quiet. His face did not show much emotion, but his shoulders shifted. He looked down at his hands for a long moment. Then he looked up at me. He said, "I did not know." I said, "That is the problem. You did not know. You did not care. You laughed at names you had never even tried to learn. You made fun of the dead as if they were jokes. Every name on that list belonged to someone, someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's mother, someone's friend, and you stood in front of all of us and treated them like garbage." Kragoth was silent. I said, "This is not only about my sister, this is about every name you laughed at. I'm standing here for all of them because no one else would." Kragoth stood up slowly. He looked at me for another long moment. Then he said something strange. He said, "Then I will fight you with honor today, not as a joke, not as a show. I have not fought with real honor in a long time. You are reminding me of something I had forgotten." He turned and walked out of the room. The other warriors in the preparation room were staring at me with their mouths open. None of them had ever heard Kragoth speak that way. None of them had ever seen him walk away from a smaller opponent without making a joke or a threat. The Tellurian with silver scales came back over to me. He bent down close and whispered, "Human, I do not know what you just did, but you have already changed something in him. Whatever happens next, remember that." A horn sounded somewhere deep in the arena. It was time. I stood up. My legs felt steady. My hands were no longer shaking. I walked toward the main arena tunnel. The tunnel was long and dark, with torches burning on the walls. I could hear the crowd above me, thousands of voices mixed together like the sound of a great ocean. As I walked, I thought about everything I had learned from watching Kragoth's old fights through the night. Kragoth was incredibly strong, but he was not fast, not really fast. He had always won his fights by crushing his enemies before they could get close enough to hurt him. He was used to opponents who tried to match his strength with their own. He had never fought someone who did not try to match him at all. Kragoth had a small weakness behind his left knee where the armor plates did not quite meet. I had seen it in recording number 142. His armor maker must have fixed it since then, but the habit of protecting that spot had faded over the years. He no longer guarded it. Kragoth had another weakness. Whenever he threw his biggest overhead strike, the one he used to finish his most famous fights, there was a half-second where his whole body was open, his arms were raised, his chest was exposed, his throat was uncovered. He always won before anyone could use this moment against him. I was not going to let myself be another victim of that strike. I was going to wait for it. I reached the end of the tunnel. The gate was closed. Beyond it I could hear the announcer speaking to the crowd in the tournament's formal language. I could hear my own name being called. Along with Kragoth's, I could hear the cheering. Most of the cheering was for him. I closed my eyes for one last moment. I thought of my sister. I thought of my mother, who was probably watching a live broadcast back on Earth, trying not to cry. I thought of every name on the list. Yesterday, every family, every story. I thought, I am not doing this alone. I'm carrying all of them with me. The gate started to rise. Sunlight poured in, bright and golden. The roar of the crowd hit me like a wave. I opened my eyes and walked out into the arena. Kragoth was already there, standing in the center, his war hammer in his hand. He looked at me as I approached. He did not laugh this time. He did not smile. He simply nodded, warrior to warrior. I nodded back. The judge raised his 6 arms. He spoke the formal words that began every blood right duel. And GT snorts. And GT. The rules were simple. No energy weapons, no outside help. The duel ended when one fighter yielded, or when one fighter could no longer continue. Crowd fell silent. I lowered into my fighting stance. Kragoth raised his hammer. The judge dropped his arms. The duel began. Kragoth moved first and the ground shook under his steps. He came at me with his hammer raised high, and even though I had studied him for hours, the pure force of his charge was almost enough to freeze me in place. Almost years of training kicked in. And GT clears throat. And GT, and I rolled sideways just as his hammer struck the arena floor where I had been standing 1 second before. The impact was so strong that pieces of stone flew into the air and sand sprayed in every direction. The crowd gasped. I was back on my feet before the sand had finished falling. Kragoth turned to face me, already swinging the hammer for a second blow. I did not try to block it. Blocking a hammer that size would have ended me instantly. I moved. That was my whole plan for the first few minutes of this fight. Move, watch, learn. The hammer swept past my head so close that I felt the wind of it in my hair. I stepped back, circling to his right. Kragoth followed me, slower now. Calculating. He was not rushing anymore. He had realized that I was not going to stand still and die. He was starting to take me seriously. Good. Some in the crowd were booing. They wanted blood. They wanted a quick, easy victory for their champion. They did not understand what they were watching, but up in the judge's box I could see the old 6-armed judge leaning forward with great interest. He had lived a long time. He had seen many fights. He could see what I was doing, even if the crowd could not. Kragoth came at me again, this time with a sideways swing meant to catch my legs. I jumped over the hammer, landed light, and struck out with my knife. It was just a small cut along his upper arm. Nothing that would harm him. And GT snorts. And GT, but it drew the tiniest line of dark blood, and Kragoth looked at it in surprise. In 311 matches, how many of his opponents had managed to cut him? First, maybe a dozen, maybe fewer. I kept moving, circling, watching his feet. His feet told me more than his face ever could. The small shift of his weight, the way his left leg locked for a moment when he pivoted fast, the way his right shoulder dropped just before a big strike. The crowd began to quiet down. They were starting to notice this was not going how they had expected. Kragoth attacked again and again, and again. Each time I slipped past the hammer by inches. Each time my small knife found a new gap in his armor. Cut on his thigh. A cut above his elbow. A small slice along his side wherein armor plate had shifted during his swings. None of the cuts were deep. None of them would end him, but they were there, and they were adding up. Kragoth began to breathe harder. His armor was heavy. His hammer was heavy. He had been swinging both for several minutes now. I, on the other hand, was wearing almost nothing and carrying only a small knife. I was barely tired. He shouted something in his own language. It was a warrior's cry meant to summon strength. He charged again. Faster this time, his hammer coming in a long sweeping arc. I ducked under the swing and drove my knife up into the small gap behind his left knee. I remembered the spot from recording 142. The armor maker had added a plate there, but the plate did not fit perfectly. There was a small gap, just the right size for a knife point. Kragoth roared. He stumbled. For the first time in 200 years, the undefeated had been forced onto one knee. The crowd went completely silent. Not a single voice, not a single breath. 10 million beings across 200 worlds watched a small human stand over the greatest warrior of the age. I could have ended him right there. Back of his neck was exposed. One good strike and it would have been over. I would have won. I would have gone home a hero. I did not do it. Instead, I stepped back. I gave him room to stand up. This was not about ending him. This was about something else. Kragoth slowly climbed back to his feet. He was bleeding from several small wounds now. He was breathing hard. His eyes met mine, and I saw something new in them. Not anger, not hate, something like understanding. He had just realized that I could have finished him and had chosen not to. He attacked again, but now his movements were different. He was not being careless. He was not playing to the crowd anymore. He was fighting like a real warrior, calm and focused, using every bit of skill he had. The hammer came in short, controlled swings. His footwork was better. His guard was higher. This was the real Kragoth, I realized. This was the warrior he had been long ago, before fame had made him lazy, before endless victories had made him arrogant. For a few minutes we danced across the arena floor, attack and counter, strike and slip, weapon and knife. The crowd was cheering now, but they were cheering both of us. They had never seen a fight like this. I took a hit. Kragoth's hammer caught me on the shoulder. It was not a direct strike, but it was enough to knock me sideways. I tasted blood in my mouth. I tumbled across the sand and came up on one knee. For the first time in this fight, the crowd thought Kragoth would win. They cheered loudly. They began to chant his name. I stood up slowly. My shoulder was on fire. I could barely move my left arm, but my right hand still held the knife. I smiled at Kragoth. He paused. My smile seemed to confuse him. Then I started to speak. Not loudly yet. First, just loud enough for him to hear me across the arena floor. I said, for Hannah Grant, my sister. I moved forward. I slipped under his next swing and cut his forearm. I said, for the children of Mars Dome. For another swing, another slip, another cut. I said, for Ambassador Kate Tai of the Jaxai people. You called them crawling insects. Cut. Kragoth was now bleeding from more than 10 wounds. He was slowing down, not because the wounds were serious, but because of what I was saying. Every name I spoke seemed to hit him harder than any blow I could have landed with my Blade, his face which had been focused and calm, was now something else. I think it was the beginning of shame. The crowd could hear me too. The sound system carried my voice to every seat. I kept speaking names as I moved. I had memorized them all during my long night. Every single one from yesterday's reading. Some I had pulled up from my data pad, others I knew from years of military service. I said for Captain Owen Bradley, who died defending the Ceres refugee ships. I said for the 7 Tellurian priests who were taken by pirates near the outer ring. I said for the Jakesai scholar who was thrown out of an airlock by raiders 10 years ago. Each name, each cut, each step. The arena had grown so quiet that I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the sand under my boots. I could hear Kragoth's heavy breaths. The crowd, 10 million strong, listened in complete silence as a small human spoke the names of the dead out loud while cutting the greatest warrior in the galaxy. Kragoth was swaying on his feet now, not from the wounds I knew, from the weight of the names he had spent years laughing at. These people, now he was being forced, one at a time, to know them. Finally, I came to the last name I had saved for the end. I said, and for every name I do not know, for every warrior whose family will never be named in a grand arena, for every life ended in the dark where no one was watching, for all of them. Kragoth let out a great roar. It was not the roar of a warrior, it was the roar of a man who had realized too late what he had done for so many years. He raised his hammer high above his head for the overhead strike, the big one, the one he always used to finish his fights, the one I had been waiting for since the duel began. His whole body was open, arms up, chest exposed, throat uncovered, that famous half-second of complete openness. I stepped inside his guard. My knife came up fast. I drove it into the soft skin just under his jaw, right where his helmet ended. It was not a fatal strike. I had chosen the angle carefully. It went just deep enough to stop him, just deep enough to end the fight. Kragoth froze. The hammer fell from his hands. It hit the sand with a heavy thud. He dropped to his knees. He looked up at me. His eyes were clear. I saw no anger in them, only a deep, tired acceptance. He whispered one word. It meant yield in his language. I knew that word. I had looked it up during the night just in case. The judge stood up. All 6 of his arms rose high. In a booming voice he declared the blood right finished. The human had won. The arena did not cheer. The arena did not boo. The arena simply sat in silence, trying to understand what they had just seen. A species they thought of as children had just defeated their greatest hero. Not with strength, not with speed, but with memory. I stood over Kragoth, my knife still in my hand. My shoulder ached. My lip was bleeding. My legs felt weak now that the danger was past, but I did not fall. I did not kneel. I stood. I looked up at the crowd. I looked at the high 8 judges' box. I looked at the ambassadors of a dozen worlds, watching from the special seating area. Then I did something no one in the galaxy had expected. I reached out my hand and helped Kragoth to his feet. The crowd gasped again. Helping a defeated opponent stand up during a blood right was almost never done. It was a sign of deep honor, a statement that the winner saw the loser as a true equal. Kragoth took my hand. His hand was 10 times the size of mine, rough and Scarred, he let me help him up. Then he did something no Vornicai champion had ever done. He bowed his head to me. A small human standing on the sand of the greatest arena in the galaxy, receiving a bow from the warrior everyone had thought could never be beaten. Somewhere out there across the stars, my mother was watching. My old commander was watching. A billion humans were watching, holding their breath, not believing what their eyes were showing them. I had survived. I had won. But my work here was not done. I took a deep breath and turned to face the judge's high box. I had one more thing to do before I could leave this arena. One more thing the galaxy needed to hear, and when I spoke it, I knew it would change everything, not just for me, not just for Kragoth, but for every human who would ever walk under foreign stars for the rest of time. The arena was waiting for me. 10 million beings across 200 worlds were watching and waiting for what would happen next. By the ancient laws of the blood right, I had every right to end Kragoth. He had yielded, but some forms of the old code allowed the winner to still claim the final strike. Many in the crowd expected me to do it. A few may have wanted me to. Revenge, after all, was simple. Revenge was understood in every language. But I had not walked into this arena for revenge. If I had wanted revenge, I could have taken it the moment my knife touched his throat. I took a slow breath. My voice when I spoke was steady. I said, "Judge of the tournament, I ask to speak to the crowd." The six-armed judge looked at me. Then he looked at the other judges. They whispered together for a moment. Finally he nodded. He said, "Speak. Human, the arena will listen." The sound system adjusted. A small device floated down from above and settled near my shoulder. My voice would be heard across every seat, every broadcast, every speaker on every planet that was watching. I turned toward the crowd. I did not raise my voice. I did not shout. I spoke simply and clearly, the way my grandfather had taught me to speak about things that mattered. I said, "My name is Oliver Grant. I am a human. I come from a small blue planet called Earth. 40 years ago we joined your council. We came here wanting to learn from you. We came here wanting to be part of something larger than ourselves." I paused. The silence was enormous. I said, "Yesterday, I sat in this arena, and I listened to the reading of the honored dead. I listened to names of warriors and children and mothers and fathers from 100 different worlds. I listened to the name of my own sister. Her name was Hannah. She was 23 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. She never reached her new job. I looked up at the high seats where the ambassadors sat. I could see some of them wiping their eyes. I said, when the priest read the names, they were laughed at, not by accident, not by a stranger in the crowd, by the champion of this tournament, by the warrior who stood in the place of greatest honor. The dead of 100 worlds were made into jokes. I turned and looked at Kragoth, who was still standing near me, his head lowered. I said, "Kragoth and I fought today. I won. By your laws, I can do what I want with him now. I can end his life. I can take his honor. I can claim everything he owns. Many of you expected me to do one of these things." I said, "I'm not going to." The crowd murmured. Voices rose and fell like a gentle wave. I said, "On my world, when someone does a great wrong, ending them is not always the right answer. Sometimes ending them is the easy answer. It lets them escape. It lets them stop thinking about what they did. Kragoth laughed at thousands of names. If I end him today, he never has to think about those names again. He gets to rest. I said I do not want him to rest. Something shifted in the air of the arena. The crowd began to lean in. They could feel that something unusual was coming. I said, last night I studied more than just Kragoth's fighting. I also studied the old laws of his people, the Vornikai. I found an ancient law that has not been used in many hundreds of years. It is called the right of witness. I now invoke that right. A gasp rose up from the Vornikai seats. The elders in their silver robes stood up quickly. They began to talk among themselves. The high judge looked at me with new interest. He said, "Human, you know our ancient laws better than many of our own. Young people, explain what you are claiming." I said, under the right of witness, the winner of a blood right may choose to claim the loser as a witness to the dead for the rest of his life. Kragoth must stand at every reading of the honored dead on every world where such readings are held. He must speak the names himself. He must travel to the homes of the dead. He must meet the families. He must learn who they were. He must carry them as I have carried my sister for every day that remains to him. The Vornikai elders went still. One of them, the oldest with a long white beard, slowly raised a hand. He said, a voice heavy with age, "This law is real. This law is ours. It has not been spoken for 600 years. The human is correct. The claim is valid if Kragoth accepts it." Everyone turned to look at Kragoth. He was still nailing on the sand. He looked up. His eyes met mine. For a long moment he did not move or speak. Then slowly he stood up. He was still much taller than me, even with his head bowed. He walked toward me and the crowd watched without making a sound. He stopped a few steps away. He placed one hand over his chest, which was the Vornikai sign of acceptance. He said, "I accept the right of witness. I will carry the names. For the rest of my days I will speak them and learn them. I will go to their families. I will listen to their stories. This is my new life." He paused. He said, "Human, Oliver Grant, you have beaten me twice today, once with your knife and once with something I do not have a name for. If your people are all like you, then the galaxy has been wrong about humans for 40 years. I have been wrong. I was a fool." The crowd erupted. It was not cheering. It was not booing. It was a strange mixed sound full of shock and respect, and a deep rolling emotion that did not have one single shape. Some beings were weeping. Some were standing with hands raised in the gestures of their home planets. The old Vornikai elder in the white beard slowly lowered his head to me. I bowed back to Kragoth. I said, "Then go and carry them well." Kragoth turned and walked slowly out of the arena toward the tunnel on the opposite side. He did not look back. 2 Vornikai guards met him at the gate and walked with him, not as prisoners walk with their keepers, but as companions walk with a friend on a long journey. The judge called for the end of the ceremony. The horn sounded slow and deep. I walked off the arena floor on my own feet, my small knife still at my belt. I was tired in a way that went all the way down to my bones. In the preparation room, medics from 3 species were waiting for me. They cleaned my shoulder and my cut lip. They gave me water and a warm blanket. The Tellurian with silver scales came in and handed me a small metal pin in the shape of a star. He said it was the highest honor his people gave to a warrior. He said it was mine now and that any Tellurian on any world would treat me as family from this day forward. I thanked him. I pinned the star to my uniform. Later I was brought before the full council of the tournament. Ambassadors from 30 worlds sat in a great circle. My own ambassador from Earth was there, too. Her name was Margaret Shaw, and her face looked 10 years younger than it had 2 days ago. She could not stop smiling. The council asked me to repeat my full speech for the official record. I did. I spoke quietly and carefully. When I finished, the council members spoke among themselves for a long time. When they were done, the chief ambassador, a tall being with feathers instead of hair, stood up. He made a formal announcement. He said, from this day forward, the tournament of 10,000 suns will include a new ceremony. Before any match begins, every champion must read at least one name from the honored dead out loud. They must know the person behind the name. They must speak of them with respect. This new custom will be called the Witness Walk. It is being added. Honor of Oliver Grant of Earth, who reminded us of something we had forgotten. He paused and looked at me. He said, Earth is no longer to be treated as a developmental species. Earth has shown the galaxy a kind of strength we had not known. From this day forward, humans will sit at every council table where they wish to sit. Your people are not children here. They are teachers. I bowed my head. I did not trust myself to speak. That night on the flight back to my ship, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not from sadness, not exactly. It was all the feelings I had pushed down over the past 2 days coming out. Now that it was safe to let them out, I thought of my sister. I thought of my mother. I thought of Kragoth, somewhere out there, now beginning his long journey of witnessing. I thought about how strange the galaxy was, how in one moment you could be the smallest creature in the room, and in the next moment you could change the world simply by refusing to sit quietly when something was wrong. 3 years passed before I saw Earth again. I continued my service in the fleet for a while, then slowly stepped back from active duty. The attention became too much. Everywhere I went, beings wanted to meet me. Reporters followed me. Schoolchildren sent me letters. I was grateful for all of it, but I was also tired. I had never wanted to be famous. I had only wanted to stand up for one moment for the dead, because no one else would. I retired from the fleet and returned to Earth. I bought a small house near what used to be the Black Sea, in an area that was quiet and green. I grew tomatoes and kept bees. I read old books. I visited my mother every Sunday. She was in her 70s now, and she liked to sit in her garden and listen to the birds. Sometimes we talked about Hannah. Sometimes we just sat together and said nothing at all. For a while I thought my story was over. It was not. One cool autumn afternoon, 3 years after the duel, I was working in my small garden when a car came up my long driveway. It was a plain silver car, the kind used by the council's diplomatic service. 3 figures stepped out. I did not recognize 2 of them at first, and then I did. An old Jakse elder, his skin shining in the afternoon light. A Tellurian priest with silver scales. Not the same one from the preparation room, but one who wore the same kind of pin I had been given years ago. and between them, walking slowly, was Kragoth. He looked older, much older. His hair had gone gray, his shoulders were still broad, but they were bent forward as if he had been carrying something heavy for a long time. He wore a simple gray robe. Not armor, he had no hammer, he had no weapons at all. I set down my garden tools. I walked to meet them at the edge of my small garden. Kragoth stopped a few steps away. He looked at me for a long moment, then he bowed his head the same way he had at the end of the duel. He said, "Oliver Grant, I have come to thank you." I invited them all in. My mother was visiting that day, and she came out of the house to see who I was speaking to. When she saw Kragoth, her hand went to her mouth. I had told her everything about that day long ago. She knew who he was. Kragoth saw her too. He walked slowly toward her. He lowered himself onto one knee so that his huge head was lower than hers. He spoke in a voice that was quieter than I had ever heard him use. He said, "You are the mother of Hannah Grant. I knew your daughter's name before I knew any others on my journey. I visited her memorial on Mars. I sat there for 3 days. I read every letter she had ever written. I wanted you to know that I carry her with me. I will carry her always." My mother began to cry. She was a strong woman, and she did not cry often. She reached out and placed her small, thin hand on Kragoth's great armored shoulder. She said nothing. She did not need to. That simple touch was forgiveness enough. We sat in the garden together for the whole afternoon. Kragoth and the others told me about the journey of the last 3 years. He had traveled to over 100 worlds. He had read names in places where no warrior had ever been invited. He had met families. He had listened to stories. He had wept with mothers and fathers from every species in the galaxy. The Witness Walk, the new tournament ceremony named after that day, had spread beyond the tournament. It was now practiced in hundreds of cities on dozens of worlds. Children learned about it in school. The reading of the honored dead, which had once been attended only by a few, was now attended by millions. The galaxy had learned to remember. As the sun began to set, Kragoth stood up to leave. He looked at me one last time. He said, "Oliver Grant, I asked once why you did not end me. I think I finally understand. If you had ended me, the galaxy would have learned that humans are strong by letting me live. The galaxy learned that humans are wise. You taught all of us something that no warrior could ever have taught." I said, "What did I teach?" He said that the dead are not weakness. The dead are the reason we keep walking. They left as the first stars were coming out. I watched their car disappear down the long driveway. I stood in my garden for a long time, not moving, just looking up at the sky where so many worlds now knew the name of a girl named Hannah, who had wanted to be a teacher. My mother came out and stood next to me. She took my hand. She said, "You did a good thing, Oliver." I said, "I just did what anyone would do." She smiled. She said, "No, son, you did what should be done. Not everyone does that is why what you did was great." We stood there together watching the stars come out. I thought about the galaxy spinning far above us. I thought about all the dead finally being remembered. I thought about all the living learning how to remember. We are a young species. We are small. Our bones are hollow like bird bones, and our worlds are gardens. We come from a blue planet that most of the galaxy had never heard of until 40 years ago. But we carry our dead with us, we do not leave them behind. And on one strange, bright morning under foreign stars I made the galaxies. Greatest warrior carry them too. That is what a human is. The end.